All right, so now we will take a look at the textbook question, BE 6.6, which is on page 6-37. So have your textbook out so you're looking at the information, and then have these templates available. So they look like this. You need one for FIFO and one for average cost. So have those printed out. I suggest printing them. We're going to be writing on these, so you'll want to have them as your record. Right, so BE 6.6 says that Battery Limited uses a perpetual inventory system. The inventory records show the following data for the first month. And it goes through, it lists a bunch of purchases and sales, gives us a lot of information. And the question says to calculate the cost of goods sold and ending inventory using first the FIFO and then next the average cost. Okay, so a lot of information, but we'll walk through it, and this is the way that you will do each question. So you start with these templates, these tables that are laid out. And if you have these questions on an exam, you will be provided a table like this, and you'll be expected to use it. So you need to know what I'm doing and how I'm tracking this, because you'll get marks for the different items in here. So you need to know how to follow this. Now you'll see the column labels here. So first we have our purchases. We'll record any purchases there. And then when we have a sale, we record them in the middle area under the cost of goods sold. And note that this is the cost. So we're not recording anything to do on the revenue side. In these charts, we're just tracking the cost side. So the cost of the inventory sold. And then the final column is our inventory on hand. So what we are left with after all of this happens. Now, if you look in the textbook at BE 6.6, it tells us a purchase, the number of units, and then the third column there, or fourth, I guess, if you count the date, says the unit cost / price. So this is really important, that when we're purchasing something, that is the cost. But when we're selling, so on August 10th, we have sales, and it says $150. That is the sales price. So we would use that to calculate our revenue, but we won't use that in our chart. So be aware of that on future questions. When you're selling, that's the sales price, but not the cost of the goods sold. Okay, so let's just start going. Here it doesn't tell us what we're selling, but you would have a chart like this for each type of inventory. So if you sell pens and pencils and erasers, you would have one of these for each separate item. So you would note that in here, this would tell you the type of inventory. So this says it's battery limited. Let's just assume these are AAA batteries. So we label what type of inventory we're talking about. And then here we don't have it, but if it gives you an opening balance, that's the first thing that you would put in. So you would put that over here in the inventory on hand. So you would, in the first line, you would say whatever the date is, and then you would start with your opening amount on your inventory in hand. Here it doesn't say that we have an opening amount, so we just go ahead and start with the first purchase. So it's on August 2nd. So we fill the date in here. And then it is a purchase, so we're filling it into the first column. So they're purchasing a quantity of 250. The unit cost is $70 each. And it tells us the total cost. But really, you're just taking the number or the quantity times the unit cost, and that gets you $17,500. So here we're given it, but you might not be given that. So you would just kind of put at the top here the formula that you follow. So the quantity times the unit cost equals the total. And for FIFO, which we're doing here, that's the same each time. So always quantity times unit cost equals the total cost. Okay, so we've got our purchase, but now that we bought this, we need to carry it over to our inventory on hand, because after we've purchased this, we have this as our inventory balance. So you basically just copy the purchase over. $250 at 70, we still have the total cost of $17,500. And that's the first purchase. So every single time you have a purchase or a sale, you will have something in the inventory on hand column. So if you're purchasing something, you have something in the purchase and inventory on hand. If you're selling something, you just have something in this cost of goods sold and inventory on hand. But we always update our inventory because this is perpetual. We're always updating that. Okay, the next transaction we have is on August 3rd. So we go ahead, put the 3rd, and it's another purchase. So it's in these first 3 columns. So we purchased 500. The cost of each of these went up, so now they're $100. So again, we take the 500 times 100, gets us a total cost of $50,000. And again, we need to update our inventory on hand. But here's where you look at each transaction separately. So we want to track now the inventory on hand in 2 separate lines. Because we're using the FIFO, so that means first in, first out. So every time we buy something, we still need to keep keep track of each separate cost that we've got. So you have to carry down that first purchase that we made. So over here, you bring down the $250 at $70 is $17,500. And then right below that, we now add the new purchase that we have. So you want to look at these as 2 separate items. So after each transaction, we need all of the information in this next line. So this red line that I'm doing, you don't need to do this on yours. But it's just a good way to show you how they're separate or the total amounts there. And I know someone's probably wondering, well, do we have to write the $250 at 70 again? And yes, to get full marks as you're doing this, you need to be writing these down every time that we have a new transaction. Okay, so we have these 2 purchases. We need to track the 2 costs separately. The next transaction happens on August 10th. And now we have a sale. So we're selling 300 units. And again, that $150, that's the sales price. So we are not using that in this. If it told us in the question sometime to calculate the revenue, we would use that $150. But the cost that we're tracking in this middle column is based on what we've got on hand. So ignore that $150 that's in the question. Okay, so first in, first out. Now that we're selling these 300 units, we have to figure out what cost to apply to them. So we look at the inventory that we have on hand. We have $250 at $70. Those were our first purchase, and then $500 at $100. So we need to first take the first ones in, and they're the first ones that go out. So we don't write 300, but we write, well, of those 300, 250 had a cost of $70 for a total cost of $17,500. But we need 50 more, and these ones had the cost of $100. So now we take our 50 times 100, and we get $5,000. So we're breaking out the first in and first out. We're breaking out those different costs. And again, we need to update our inventory on hand after we do this. So when you're looking at these sales, you basically look and say, okay, well, I had $250, and then you subtract the amount that you sell. So $250 minus $250 is 0. So we've used up all of the batteries that we purchased at $70. So you don't have to write anything in this top line here. Then we say, well, we had 500 of $100. We sold 50, so we are still left with 450 of the batteries at $100. And we multiply those, so the 450 times 100, we're left with 45,000. That's our ending inventory after this transaction. So when you sell, you don't write necessarily the total sale amount here. So we didn't write 300 because we had the two different costs we needed to look at. So you break them out based on that first in, first out. Okay. So again, I'm just going to draw this red line just so it really stands out for you guys right now. But you're not required to have this line when you do an assignment or an exam. Okay, the next transaction is another purchase on August 15th. We are purchasing 900 at $120 each. So we take the 900 times 120 and we get a total cost of 108. Okay, so again, we carry everything over into the inventory on hand and update that. We still have 450 at $100 equals 45,000. So we carry that down first, and then we record the new ones that we just purchased. So we're left with 450 at 100 and 900 at 120. I don't know about you guys, but I find this fun. So it's kind of like a puzzle that you're piecing everything together. You're walking through the steps. So hopefully you can see it that way and you'll enjoy tracking the inventory. Okay, the last transaction that we have on August 25th, we have another sale. And we're selling 325 units. Again, that 180 that it tells us, that's the sales price. It's not the cost, it's the sales price. So we ignore that in this question. Instead, we look back to what do we have on hand after the previous purchase, and we take the first ones in and they become the first ones out. So we're left, the first in are the 450 at $100. We're only selling 325 units. So we get to use the full 325 because we have enough of these items at $100. So we take 325 times 100 gets us the 32,500, and then we update our inventory on hand. So we had 450, we subtract the 325 that we sold. We're left with 125 units at $100. Multiply those, it's 12,500. And then we still have the full 900 at $120, the full cost for those of 108,000. Okay, so that looks at recording a full month of transactions. We're going to assume that's all that happened in August, or it tells us that's what's all the data for the first month. So we've tracked everything, but to complete this, you always need to look at totals. Totals or your ending inventory. So we go through When we're looking at purchases, it is the total amount. So you add the 250 plus 500 plus 900, and that gets us total purchases of 1650. Now, when it comes to the unit cost, since they're different every time, it doesn't make sense to add them. You actually just don't need anything in this column. So we're only looking at quantity and total cost. To get our total cost of purchases in the month, add the 1750 plus 50,000 plus 108. If we add those up, we get 175,500. So that could be, you need to do this work, but the question might ask you, what were the total purchases in the month? So you find that here. Question might ask you, what were your total costs of goods sold? That's this middle section. So again, we add this up, add the 250 plus the 50 plus 325. So we sold a total of 625 units. Again, we don't put anything in that unit cost. We add the total cost, so 17,500 plus 5,000 plus 32,500 gets us a total cost of goods sold of 55,000. And now, so this part here, for the purchases and the cost of goods sold, we're calculating totals. So we added these up. When it comes to inventory on hand, we're actually just figuring out our ending balance. So we do a little bit of a summary here because at the end of the month, we want to know what our inventory balance is. So now you're just looking at the last section and you're summarizing it here. So we say, well, as of the 25th, after this last sale, we had 125 plus 900. So we have total quantity of 1025. They have different prices, so we don't fill anything in here. But if we want to know our total inventory value, add the 12,500 plus 108. And this gets us to 120,500. So that's what you would see in the trial balance, hopefully, at the end of the month, is the 120,500. Okay, so that's what these questions look like as you go through and you track them. It's a lot of steps, but as long as you follow them through step by step, so record your purchases and then update the inventory on hand. So carry down what you previously had, add in the purchase amount. When it comes to a sale, and again, this is under FIFO. When it comes to a sale, we record the first in, and then if we need more from the second cost, we would add that as well. And I want to make a quick note. So the ending balance that we said here, we showed this summary of the total cost and the total quantity. But when we actually start the next month, so let's say we're done August, now we start having transactions in September. You would start on September 1st and you break out the ending inventory again. So you would start with 125 at 100, 12,500 is that one, and we've got the 900 at 120. Gets us to the 108. So this bottom line that we see here, the total inventory on hand at the end of the month, that's just a summary to double check. But we're still breaking these out into the two different costs when we go ahead and start the next month. Okay, so that is FIFO. We still need to complete the average cost, but I'll just stop the video and I'll start that one in the next video. So same question, but we'll look at average cost.